Alright, let's attempt to make a video today. I tried to make a video, I think last week, but the video ended up buffering too much, and I only watched it a few days later and realized like half the video couldn't even understand what I was saying. So hopefully this video will be a little bit better, but kind of an important little update video, because if we look at the daily on Bitcoin, and today's date is May 27th, 2026, 9:25 a.m. We're getting this really, this is a really important area where we're at and what's been going on. And I think, I've talked about it before, where back here where it looked like we were about to break down, but they saved it. They even put in another reversal back here and, started to drop it and then saved it again. And this ended up, going on for another month and a half of just chopping in this, kind of rising wedge that we've had, that I've been talking about forever, that we've just been chopping since February. And, nothing has really happened too much. We've just been slow grinding up, slow grinding down. And, well, the reason I'm making a video today is because we are starting to break through this area, this trend line that goes back all the way to February. Very important trend line. And if we go back and we can look and see what happens when, similar things happen. This was last year, November of 25 into January. It was the same kind of deal, kind of a rising wedge after, a descending, descending from all-time high, and then, we coil in here in a rising wedge. And this is kind of like the area where we're at right now, is we're breaking through, and we're starting to fall out of this rising wedge pattern. And look what happens when you do that. You get big moves downward. So, and then look where we're at right now. We've been in here for a long time, a lot longer than the other pattern we had, late last year or early this year. I mean, this pattern has been, this is February, and, we're almost to June now. So almost 4 months in here, about 3.5 months of coiling, in this rising wedge. And on, today's the 27th, and now we're breaking through. We had this reversal candle last night, and I put on a ton of size short. Probably one of the biggest trades I've ever done, because this red reversal is very nice. It's got a higher high, it's got the moving averages rolling down. We closed below our trend line, and when you close and you got a nice candle set up, this is what happens. We've already dropped a lot today. Now, can it, come back up and play around this trend line? I mean, this is a very important trend line as well. I mean, this darker orange one that goes horizontal here, I've talked about that trend line a million times. If we zoom back out, and that was our cup and handle, neckline trend line that comes all the way through, and it's just been, played with so many times. It's such an important horizontal trend line. And that's, where we're falling below right now. And, not to mention we're coming out of this rising wedge pattern, which ends up breaking down eventually. So, we do have a little bit of room to drop into here. And mention also the pattern, which is also bearish. We have, a shoulder right here, a head. And we've kind of got another shoulder right here. It's not the greatest pattern ever, but it's there. Maybe another day or two, and this would have looked better as a shoulder. But that's kind of what this is. Shoulder here, a head right here, and then here's another shoulder. So, and then I've talked about my targets to get to, and I've actually got a few targets to get to. I still think ultimately we make our way down into that, 54K area. That was the measured move originally from this move down, and it might be a little bit different now because we're higher up in our pattern. let's see, nope, that's not what I want to do. I want to do it from the break. So wherever this broke, right here, it's a low point. So right there. Move over here, and this is our breaking point. And this takes us to almost down to my trend line down here. So this is 50,000. I mean, that was our measured move from this move down, and that's what it would be right here. So, and just call it 49, 50, 51,000 on Bitcoin. You know, this is an important trend line down here too. That goes back quite a ways. If we zoom out to a weekly look, you know, we can get a better look at it. Touches in there, touches there. If I scroll down, I'm sure I can find a better, you know, chart with more data that goes back, but let's see here. This might not be the best chart for this, but you know, there is an area in here that comes across. Let's see here. Move this down just a bit. Picks up a swing here. There's some play in there. Swing here. Some play touches around there. There's a level right around 50K. I mean, if I went down to a daily, there's going to be a lot more touches. It's kind of harder to see. Bitcoin is always kind of reacted right around that 50K level. So, I mean, I'm definitely thinking we are going to get there. And, you know, we should, you know, see a bounce around that area. Maybe a quick wick down to the low 40s and then back up probably pretty quickly, I would imagine. So here's another measured move I have. So something I was kind of looking at too was if this pattern could end up being an inverse cup and handle, which would take us down to 28K Bitcoin, which would be crazy. But if we look at this from this weekly chart, you know, this kind of almost looks like a inverse cup and handle starting to form. It's not completed yet, but it'll be something to look at. So if we where this trend line starts here, does this look like a cup, an upside down cup, and then a handle starting to form right here? And if we do come down to this, you know, 60K area sometime in June, you know, down to, you know, 50K or whatever, we will kind of have a little handle here. So this kind of cup and a handle forming, and then could that lead to an even bigger move down to 29K? You know, because that would be the measured move. So from the highest point, you know, back here to all-time high to the neckline that comes across of the cup, and from where the breakout would be, you know, sometime in June or August or whatever, you know, depending, maybe we drop down and we set up, we chop around, and if we get this little, you know, handle looking thing, well, you know, you also have these swings coming back here that touches that point and that touches that point. Could we get a third touch down here? And that would also be the measured move. It's just something interesting to look for. That would be wild to see Bitcoin come all the way down, but you know, I have this drawn kind of prematurely as like something that could potentially happen. You know, there's a lot of levels to get through here, but I mean, you know, I've said it all year long in all my videos. I'm very bearish on Bitcoin this year. It looks very extremely bearish ever since it broke this trend line back in January. You know, from that rising wedge pattern we had. You know, that was such a big area that we broke through. You know, if we just zoom out, you know, ever since 2020, it's been coiling in here, and instead of breaking up and making a move, we broke down through it, and it is what it is now at this point. It looks like we're falling down, and we're going to go lower on Bitcoin, and I want to see things get up and go, but I'm just telling it how it looks. It doesn't look good. All throughout, history, I've even gone back and looked at all these patterns and everything, and all of these patterns always usually play out like 99% of the time. Like, you get a rising wedge, you drop, pin it, could go either way, drop. Another rising wedge right here, then you drop more. Here's, kind of a falling wedge, then you get up off of it. Falling wedge right here, you get up. It's just, here's another one, falling wedge, get up. That's just how it plays. Here's a descending wedge, so move is down, coils in here and then drops. Yeah, I mean it all just plays out how it should, and this time should be no different. I mean, rising wedge back here, drops. Here's another rising wedge, should drop here. We've got the candles to do it. We've got a nice monthly that's forming. It's only got what 4 days left, I think, on the monthly. It's red inverse hammer. What do you think is going to happen in June? We should go lower. We've got let's just go through the weekly candles while we're here. I talked about last week, if my video was kind of choppy, but if we got a green hammer, I could see us getting up maybe one more time. But we got this kind of red hanging man candle. The moving averages, kind of were rolling up on the weekly, so it had me kind of scratching my head thinking, are we just going to get up again and then roll over? But now it's pretty clear that this is looking like it's rolling over here. We had a red 2 week that we just got. I hated how we didn't break the high of this candle, and we were pretty flat on this 2 weeks, so I didn't like that. But pretty big red candle, had already broke the low of the green previous 2 week. But I mean, like I said, like this move up didn't look right, and while everyone was celebrating Bitcoin getting up, I'm like, yeah, you got up off of this red inverse, with almost no lower wick on any of these 2 weeks right back here. It just didn't look right. So, but now we're falling off of the green, so it makes me think, well, we need a better setup candle to drop off of. Let's look at the 3 week that's coming up. Same thing with the 3 week. We're dropping off this green. We didn't break the high of this green candle. So I don't like that, but also it got up off of this red back here, and that wasn't right. There was no lower wick on this 3 week, no lower wick on that 3 week. Now the moving averages are, the 8 started to cross the 10, but now with this big massive red 3 week we've got going that closes in 4 days, it's going to pull that 8 back down, and so it's actually going to look pretty tight in here once this closes. And then your monthly. Let's go to the monthly. Red inverse, and this is going to be a unicorn style candle to drop off of. Like, I mean, on the monthly, you get your original, drop, from all-time highs. Here come the moving averages. You get down here, and then, this is just a bare pullback. You trade up for a couple months as the moving averages roll down. You trade up into the moving averages with this upper wick right here. I'll zoom in. Trading up into the moving averages. Now you're selling down. You're going to get your red inverse in 4 days, 10 hours. It might even be a bigger candle. I don't know. It might still just stay that size. I'd like it to be a little bit bigger candle. And then here you go. Your moving averages are rolling down. So what do you think is going to happen in June and July and maybe August? Like, you should have another, 3 to 4 month run downward if you get a candle like this. So look at this last candle. Here's your last, red reversal candle right here with a higher high. This has a higher high. You should see a move down. So, and the moving averages are right here, rolling over. So I think this candle will say it all. If it stays red and it closes towards the lowest part of the wick, or lowest part of the candle, then yeah, it's pretty bearish. So apologies, I'm a little under the weather. This is all I want to talk about is just Bitcoin. I mean, there's still, I know I've talked about it all year. I'm just not bullish at all. Like, I don't see any signs that tell me that we're going to get up and go on a huge run. This is really starting to look more bearish as each day goes. The longer we've been coiling in here, it makes me think we're going to see an even bigger move downward. Just because we've been coiling for so long, we've been letting all these moving averages catch up and everything. So I just wanted to give a heads up out there that I'm still thinking, probably we'll see some resistance in the low 70,000. We'll probably get there before the monthly closes, low 70,000. And then maybe June we get to 60,000, maybe down to 50,000, and then who knows, maybe we see a nice pop up for a while, and then we'll just play it as it goes. But I mean, yeah, I still expect to see 50,000 Bitcoin, 50 to 54,000 Bitcoin at some point, soon, sometime this year, sooner than later, I expect in the next 1 to 2 months. I mean, that's just kind of what I'm expecting, and I've kind of said all year long. It's taken a little bit longer than I thought it would, but because, I mean, ultimately, like I talked about, if we go back and look at the yearly candle real quick, I talked about what I wanted, and I still want this to happen, but, we're already halfway through the year, and we still got a second leg lower to go. Let me clear the trend lines so we can see better. I have a million alerts on. I want us to drop. I want us to get this drop and then get back up and get a green candle to close the year. We got 7 months, 5 days to do it. We've got to get this second leg lower, so that could take a few months. And then I'm hoping in the last few months of the year, we can bottom and get right back up and get a green candle, because then that would give me a lot of confidence that 2027 we could have a bullish year. So Bitcoin's got to get to work here soon. We got to get this drop, and then we can see, possibilities of getting back up, but we got to get this drop first. All right, that's all I got.